You know, in some ways, we live in a golden age. There's a lot of problems, and some that are ominous in the threats to the order that is presently in place by forces that would undermine our freedoms to proclaim the truth. But as things stand at the moment, with the internet, with the distributions channels that are available, we can publish in ways that previously weren't available as we adjust to these new changing realities and take advantage of new technologies. And so, you know, the ability to bring back into print some things that were from a former generation. On the table back there's a number of reprints of J.W. McGarvey's material that is available that I highly recommend, a scholar from yesteryear that whose writings are still relevant. But if we adjust to the changing technologies and the current environment, we can benefit greatly with the opportunities and the information that can be distributed so freely and so readily today. And the gift of travel, that's one thing Barry has been able to take advantage of, is the ability to travel to foreign countries, in his case to the land of Israel, and then report back and film and share that via Appian Media, opens doors that... Can you imagine 30 years ago as a Bible class teacher, the ability to go to a YouTube channel and be able to access that good material like he and his team put together? It's remarkable. It's really amazing. So we are blessed, even though, you know, there are storm clouds that threaten on the horizon. There's still a lot to be thankful for in this present era. But Brother Barry Britnell is going to speak on the subject, I believe, that the church shows God's glory. You know, there are some that would say, preach Christ, not the church. But when you preach Christ in his fullness, the church that he established, the body of which he is head, is central and cannot be ignored. And for the fact that we can be members of that is a wonderful blessing, because in that relationship we have fellowship with him. But Barry and his wife Tabitha, they live here in Athens. They're members of the Capshaw congregation. His children are Jacob and Samuel and Elizabeth Ann. He has had a long association with this school, with ABS. Also, as I mentioned, is a part of Appian Media. He travels frequently to the land of Israel and produces, as he describes it, biblically sound videos that are useful in teaching others about the gospel. And that's exactly the case. They are informative and helpful and help us get a real connection of the biblical story with the land in which that story unfolded. He also contributes regularly to the archaeology column in Truth Magazine, and so he and several others rotate in that space. And his articles always reflect a love of the land, but more importantly, the love of the one who walked those hills 2,000 years ago. And so we would ask you to give your attention to Brother Britnell.
Good morning. It's a pleasure to be with you this morning. I have to tell you that we have at our house one of those white erasable calendars that you can, you put all your appointments and everything on. And at the end of last month, my wife and my daughter began erasing June and started to put July up there. And as they did, they put all the little appointments, doctor's appointments and everything that we have on our calendar. But then on today, they had a big circle around it and stars and everything. Something big was happening that day. And so quite frankly, I was touched. I thought, wow, they thought so much about this lecture and the lectureship in general and my participation in it that they have marked it thus so on the calendar. And as we got closer, they began to ask questions. What's the lecture? What's the whole lectureship about? What is your lecture in particular about? What's it titled? And I would tell them. And then over the last week or so, it was, what time is your lecture? And how long is your lecture going to last? And I began to detect that there was something amiss, something that I wasn't familiar with, and something I was missing. And upon further investigation, I found out that the circles and the squares and the highlighting of that date on our calendar had nothing to do with this lectureship or my participation in it, but had everything to do with the grand opening of the Publix that's right down the road. And so I am deeply appreciative for everybody's attendance here, but especially for the two of them who have taken time out of their incredibly busy schedule today to come and hear me. But I appreciate it. It's good to be here. Good to see all of you. I appreciate you being here. For the last couple of years, I've had the privilege of standing on this stage about once a month and talking to the wonderful young men and women who attend here at Athens Bible School. And I'm honored to do so. And that's because I believe in the mission of this school. My experience with Athens Bible School has taught me that I can believe in what they're doing. My association with Athens Bible School actually goes back several decades. I enrolled here as a student in the fall of 1976 in the 3rd grade. My teacher was Mrs. Ann Sasser. Her husband, Jim, was a gospel preacher and spent many years teaching and preaching on the southern African continent. So Mrs. Sasser, while she was teaching me about math and science and all that, she also taught me about songs she had learned while living overseas. But more than that, she taught me about God. She taught me how to live honestly and how to treat others with kindness and compassion. And she wasn't the only one here at Athens Bible School who did that. For the next 10 years, I had the privilege of attending this school and learning from such people as Ruby Hall, Sam Buchanan, Joe Olson, Bill Merle, Bobby Graham, who is in our audience this morning, Don Osborne, A.J. Rollins, Elna Toon, Dolores Thompson, and many, many more. They taught me about mathematics. They taught me about science. They taught me about art. They taught me about history. But just like Ann Sasser, they also taught me about God. They taught me about Jesus. They taught me through their words and through their lives what it meant to look like a child of God. They taught me how to live with your fellow man and how to love Jesus and how to love these people as Jesus already loves them. And through their efforts, they helped impress in my mind the importance of a place like Athens Bible School, a place where children can come and they can learn all of the important things that they need to learn in school, but they can do so in an environment where you can also teach children about God. One time I was struggling in chemistry, and my teacher recognized this. And he called me to his office and he said, "What's the problem?" And I said, "I just don't get it. I don't find any of this interesting." He said, "Well, I think it's because you're thinking about this class all wrong." He said, Can you tell me who invented chemistry?" And I could kind of see where this conversation was going. So I said, "Well, God did." He said, That's right. When you're studying chemistry, don't think about it as a science class. Think about it as a Bible class. The more you learn about chemistry, the more you learn about God. Well, that conversation had an impact on me. I still made a C in the class, but I appreciated the class so much more. Those types of conversations can only happen at a place like Athens Bible School. And because of that, I had the opportunity to associate with the wonderful people at this school, and because I saw the way they conducted their lives and the way they devoted their lives to the mission of this school, then I became a true believer in Athens Bible School. After moving back to this area, my wife and I decided to enroll our children here. Our oldest son, Jacob, graduated here in 2015. Our second child, Samuel, graduated here in 2019. And this last May, our youngest child, Elizabeth Ann, graduated from this wonderful institution. In addition to that, my wife, Tabitha, started teaching here in the high school science department. And with the end of this past year, she completed 12 years of teaching children about science. About 10 years ago, I was honored to serve on the board of directors here, which I did for a number of years. See, as you can tell, I'm fully vested into the success of Athens Bible School. And I want as many people as possible to know, love, and appreciate this school as I do. But all of that is due to the fact that when I was younger, I experienced the good things that the people associated with this school were doing. My topic for today is, I believe the church demonstrates the glory of Jesus, and in particular, the early church, but us too. You know, throughout the book of Acts, Luke records for us the amazing growth of the church through the first century. In Acts 2, verse 41, it says, So those who received his word were baptized, and they were added that day about 3,000 souls. Acts 2, verse 47 says, The Lord added to their number day by day those who were being saved. Acts 4, verse 4 says, But many of those who heard the word believed, and the number of men came to be about 5,000. Acts 5, verse 14 says, And more than ever, believers were added to the Lord, multitudes of both men and women. So how did this happen? How did the growth of the church happen in such a dramatic way? Why were these people so committed to Jesus? Well, it's because they had seen him with their own eyes. They listened to his teaching, and they watched him as he conducted his life. Just as my life experiences have convinced me in the mission of Athens Bible School, the people of the first century used their own life experiences to be convinced in Jesus. And when the time came for them to stand up and make a decision, they did. And when they had the opportunity to tell others, they did. And consequently, the church grew quickly, despite the political environment of that time. This impact on the life of the people, the church demonstrates the glorious nature of the one that they had experienced, Jesus. So we ask the question, what did they experience that caused them to act the way they did? Well, they experienced his glory, his divine quality. But how? Well, let's talk about that. First of all, they experienced his teaching. They experienced his teaching. In the book of John, chapter 7, the officer stated that no one spoke like this man. And that's true. No one spoke like Jesus. In Mark 6, when Jesus taught in the synagogue in Nazareth, the people said, Where did this man get these things? Where is the wisdom given to him? You know, they couldn't believe what they were hearing. Why did Jesus' teaching have such an impact on the people? It's because Jesus was relatable. Jesus was relatable. For most of the teachers at the time, they were not relatable people. But how was Jesus relatable? Well, I can think of two reasons. First of all, Jesus was relatable with people because he would talk with anyone. He would talk with anyone. It didn't matter who it was. Jesus would talk with them. Jesus would talk with men. He would talk with women. He would talk with old people. He would talk with young people. He would talk to those who are married. He would talk to those who weren't married. He would talk to widows. He would talk to people with illnesses, people who were struggling, government leaders, farmers, fishermen, beggars, Jewish people. He would talk to Roman people. He would talk to Jewish people who were working for the Romans. He would speak with openly sinful people like prostitutes. Jesus would talk with anyone. And that made him relatable. And because of this, Jesus was able to connect with people in incredibly personal ways. And once that connection was made, he would talk to them about God. In John 4, we have this incredibly beautiful story of Jesus speaking with the woman from Samaria. Beginning in verse 5, it reads, "So he came to the town of Samaria called Sychar, near the field that Jacob had given to his son Joseph. Jacob's well was there. So Jesus, wearied as he was from his journey, was sitting beside the well. It was about the 6th hour. A woman from Samaria came to draw water. Jesus said to her, 'Give me a drink,' for the disciples had gone into the city to buy food. The Samaritan woman said, 'How is it that you, a Jew, ask a drink from me, a woman of Samaria?'" You know, this woman wasn't living her life the way she should have been living it. Most of the people of that time would not have given this woman the time of day, but not Jesus. Jesus spoke to her. You know, and at first, all he did was ask her for something to drink. But this simple request was all that it took for Jesus to become relatable to her. And as they continued to talk, Jesus was able to speak with her about God. Jesus was relatable because he was willing to speak with anyone. But more than that, Jesus was relatable with people because he would talk about anything. Jesus spoke in a way that connected him to the people he was speaking to. Luke 2, we have an account of Jesus' family traveling from Nazareth to Jerusalem for the feast. And as Jesus' parents were traveling home, you know, they look around and they can't find Jesus anywhere. He was not with them. They returned to Jerusalem. They found him in the temple. And verse 46 says, "After 3 days they found him in the temple, sitting among the teachers, listening to them and asking them questions. And all who heard him were amazed at his understanding and his answers." You know, even at a young age, Jesus knew how to speak with the teachers. His knowledge of religious topics amazed the religious leaders at the time. But in addition to religious topics, Jesus would talk about common, everyday things. And this helped him have conversations with common, everyday people. His parables had subject matters like sowing seed, wheat, weeds, losing a coin, shepherding, mustard seeds, leaven, burying of treasures, the buying and selling of items, nets, fishing. He would talk about where to put the light in your house to have the best light across the room. He would talk to them about the birds and the flowers and the hills and the rain. He would talk to them about building their houses on good, solid foundations. And because Jesus spoke about all types of topics, all types of people could relate to him. And as a result, they would listen to him. Why was Jesus' teaching so relatable? It's because he would talk to anyone about anything. He was able to do this because Jesus is the Son of God. He was involved in the creation of these people and these topics. His divine nature allowed him to be relatable. And consequently, the people of the first century were able to experience his teaching. Today, all of us, as members of the church, need to be willing to do the same thing. We should tell others about the teachings of Jesus. And in doing so, we can let those around us experience the teachings of Jesus and therefore experience his glory. Secondly, not only did the people experience the teachings of Jesus, but the people also experienced the miracles of Jesus. Admittedly, seeing and experiencing Jesus' glory and divine nature is a bit more evident with a miracle. I mean, with that being said, these miracles impacted the people of that time. Mark 2, we have this account of Jesus healing a paralytic. Verse 1 says, "And he returned to Capernaum after some days, and it was reported that he was at home. And many were gathered together so that there was no more room, not even at the door. And he was preaching the word to them. And they came, bringing to him a paralytic carried by 4 men. And when they could not get near to him because of the crowd, they removed the roof above him. And when they had made an opening, they laid down the bed on which the paralytic lay. And when Jesus saw their faith, he said to the paralytic, 'Son, your sins are forgiven.' Now, some of the scribes are sitting there, questioning in their hearts, 'Why does this man speak like that? He's blaspheming. Who can forgive sins but God?' And immediately Jesus, perceiving in his spirit that they thus questioned within themselves, he said to them, 'Why do you question these things in your hearts? Which is easier to say to the paralytic, "Your sins are forgiven," or to say, "Rise, take up your bed and walk"? But that you may know that the Son of Man has authority on earth to forgive sins," he said to the paralytic, "I say to you, rise, pick up your bed and go home." And he rose and immediately picked up his bed and went out before them all, so that they were all amazed and glorified God, saying, "We never saw anything like this." You know, during the first century, Capernaum was a small Jewish fishing village. Many historians and scholars estimate the town was probably around 1,000 people. Because of the city's location, it had a lot of travelers come through. This is probably why the Romans had a centurion and soldiers and even a tax office there. As Jesus performed miracles in the city, people were amazed. In this particular situation, there was a large crowd who witnessed this. Not only were there local residents, but the scriptures tell us that the Pharisees and teachers of the law were there. When it was all over, the Bible tells us that everyone was amazed, and they glorified God. You know, as you read through Scripture, it's easy for us to move from one story to the next story very quickly. And in fact, in this exact passage, the story goes from the healing of this paralytic man directly into the calling of Matthew to be an apostle. We're not given a lot of details about the effect that this miracle had on people. Now, obviously this is supposition on my part, but I just don't envision the people witnessing this miracle and then never, ever speaking of it again. As people left the house where this occurred, they could probably talk of nothing except this. Men, as they would arrive at their house, they'd be telling their wives, "Honey, you can't believe what I just saw." Other people probably started thinking of other people, friends that they knew, who could be healed by Jesus. And think about this man who was healed. I mean, can you imagine what his life was like the next few days? Everywhere he went, people would be asking him nonstop about what had happened. These people were experiencing the miracles of Jesus. In Mark 10, we have the account of Jesus healing a blind man in Jericho. Verse 46 says, "They came to Jericho, and as he was leaving Jericho with his disciples, a great crowd, Bartimaeus, a blind beggar, the son of Timaeus, was sitting beside the roadside. And when he heard that it was Jesus of Nazareth, he began to cry out and said, 'Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me.' And many rebuked him, telling him to be silent. But he cried out the more, 'Son of David, have mercy on me.' And Jesus stopped and said, 'Call him.' And they called the blind man, saying, 'Take heart, get up, he's calling you.' Throwing off his cloak, he sprang up and came to Jesus. Jesus said to him, 'What do you want me to do for you?' The blind man said, "Rabbi, let me recover my sight." Jesus said to him, "Go your way. Your faith has made you whole." And immediately he recovered his sight and followed him along the way. You know, notice that Mark tells us that there was a great crowd where this occurred. I wonder what those people spoke about the rest of the day. No doubt, many of their conversations centered on this incredible event that they had witnessed. These people were experiencing the miracle of Jesus. In John 11, we have this beautiful account of Jesus coming to Bethany after Lazarus had died. In this passage, we are told that Bethany was near Jerusalem. And because of that, quote, many of the Jews had come to Mary and Martha to console them concerning their brother. Many of the Jews had heard that Lazarus had been sick. Many of the Jews knew that Lazarus had died. Many of the Jews came to Bethany to console the family. Many of the Jews knew that Lazarus had been dead for 4 days. Many of the Jews saw Jesus coming. Many of the Jews saw Jesus weep. Many of the Jews heard Jesus exclaim, "Lazarus, come forth." And many of the Jews saw a man who they knew to be dead walk from the grave. These people experienced the miracles of Jesus. Throughout Jesus' ministry, he traveled from community to community performing miracles. He helped the blind to see. He cleansed those with leprosy. He fed those who were hungry. He provided comfort to those with demons. He enabled those who could not walk the ability to do so. He raised loved ones from the dead. These people experienced the miracles of Jesus and therefore saw firsthand his glory on full display. The Lord's church was born of those who had seen the miracles of Jesus. This led the people to completely change their lives. Today, Christians' faith is built upon the ultimate miracle, the resurrection of Jesus from the dead. And this single miracle continues to change lives today. And finally, not only did people experience the teachings of Jesus, and not only did they experience his miracles, but they also experienced Jesus. For the Jews who lived or were visiting Jerusalem, that last Passover during Jesus' life was one to remember forever. For the past 3 years, this man named Jesus, a lowly carpenter from Nazareth, where nothing ever good comes from, had been traveling around and teaching in a way that left people in complete amazement. In addition, he had been performing miracles that were well documented and could be proved by eyewitness testimony as being true. The common people recognized this. They were not blinded by their own goals or political ideals. They saw the good that was Jesus. You know, at the beginning of that week, they celebrated Jesus. They put him on a donkey, praised his name in thanksgiving and honor. They continued to watch him as he stood up day after day to the religious and political leaders and taught of love and kindness and mercy. Then, for seemingly no logical reason at all to the common people, Jesus is arrested. They watch him as he's led to Annas and Caiaphas, then to their very own Sanhedrin. From there, he's taken to the Romans, first to Pilate, and then to Herod Antipas, and then back to Pilate, where amazingly he's unjustly sentenced to death by crucifixion. The people watch him as he's led from Pilate to Golgotha. They watch as he's nailed to a cross. They watch as the sky grows dark in the middle of the day. They watch him speak kindness to his mother, his friend, his companion on the cross, and even speak kindness to his captors. Then they watch his lifeless body as it's taken from the cross and buried. Then, on the first day of the week, they hear rumors that Jesus is alive. Later, Jesus is seen by disciples and by other groups of people. Everyone is talking about Jesus. In Luke 24, we have this wonderful story of Jesus' encounter with two men on the way to Emmaus. One of them, named Cleopas, answered him, "Are you the only visitor in Jerusalem who does not know the things that's happened in the last days?" He says to him, "What things?" He said the things concerning Jesus of Nazareth, a man who was a prophet, mighty in deed and word before God and all the people, and how our chief priests and rulers delivered him up to be condemned to death, and they crucified him. But we had hoped that he'd been the one to redeem Israel. But besides all this, it's now the third day since those things happened. And some of the women of our group went to the tomb early this morning, and when they did not find the body, they came back saying that they had even seen a vision of angels who said that Jesus was alive. And some of those who were with us went to the tomb and found it just as the women had said. Everybody was talking about Jesus. They were experiencing Jesus. They experienced his kindness, his love, his mercy, his compassion. They experienced Jesus through the good times in his life. They experienced Jesus through the rough times of his life. They experienced his death. But the end of the story was not written because they also experienced his resurrection. They experienced Jesus. And in doing so, they experienced his glory. You know, the people of the first century had a unique opportunity. Through their own eyes, they experienced Jesus' teaching, and in do so, saw his glory. Through his own eyes, they experienced Jesus' miracles, and in doing so, they saw his glory. And through their lives, they experienced Jesus' life, and in doing so, saw his glory. This impact on their lives demonstrated to them that Jesus was no common man. 7 weeks later, as Peter and the other apostles stood up in Jerusalem and proclaimed Jesus as the Christ, the people remembered what they had experienced with Jesus when he was with them. And as they realized their own inadequacies, they asked the only question they could ask. What do we do? What shall we do? And with that simple question, the church began to grow. And that growth was the result of people experiencing the glory of Jesus. The formation of this body of believers, the Lord's church, shows that Jesus was no ordinary Jewish teacher. He was the Messiah. He was the Christ. He was the Son of God. As I mentioned in the beginning, I enrolled at Athens Bible School in 1976, having no idea what an impact it would have on my life. but through the experiences I've had in my life, I'm committed to the mission of this school. Today, I encourage all of us to take a lesson and learn from the Christians of the first century, the Lord's church. As we live our lives, let us allow ourselves to experience the teachings of Jesus. Allow ourselves to experience the miracles of Jesus through faith in the accounts of these miracles in Scripture. And finally, allow ourselves to experience Jesus through His Word and His love and mercy towards us. In doing this, may we appreciate the glory of Jesus like the disciples in the book of Acts, and stop at nothing to tell others about Jesus and demonstrate His glory in our lives. Thank you so much for your kind attention.
As I sat down, just as Barry began to speak, I received a text from one of my fellow elders back at Alvin, pointing me to an article that had appeared in the recent press. Church of England declares there is no official definition of a woman. You know, we know that insanity has reigned in politics and in the woke movement, but it's also invading religion and long-established churches that, at least in some sense, used to have some respect for Bible authority. The pulpit commentary, which is in many of our libraries, and actually, though it's 100+ years old, is useful in providing basic guidance to, the text as such, was a product of the Anglicans. And yet that human denomination has drifted so far that it's nothing but a reflection of the current progressive woke movement, standing for nothing any longer. So what is the church? The church, in man's definition, is now there's no reason for it to exist, because join the popular mentality that reigns in politics, and that becomes your secular religion. But the church that Jesus established is based upon definable teaching. I remember Connie Adams on numerous occasions would say, in giving counsel to young men regarding how they should approach preaching, is he recalls the statement that was made in John chapter 12 by the Greeks that came to visit the Lord, "Sirs, we would see Jesus." And that is a good attitude for us as preachers to remember as we stand before a congregation, is what we are presenting is Jesus, His teachings, His miracles, His authority. And there's the solution for helping us understand why the early church grew, as Barry pointed out. I think the money quote in his article is, how did the growth of the early church happen? Why were their members so committed? 3 points. They had seen Jesus, they had listened to His teaching, they had watched Him conduct His life. And if we communicate to people today the message of Jesus, even on something as simple as when He was asked, is it lawful to divorce your wife for any cause? He went back and made a clear statement as to man and woman. The nature of marriage is a joining together of male and female. And then he emphasized the lifelong commitment of that relationship and the sole exception on which He authorizes divorce and remarriage. So clarity on social conditions and on moral issues that arise today are found through looking at the teachings of Jesus. Thank you, Barry, for pointing us back to the one that gives clarity and that gives us reason for being a member of a body that is so important that it vastly excels any other consideration, any other organization that we could be connected with. Brother Lance is going to offer a few comments now at this point, so please give his attention.
A little bit of housekeeping as far as coming up here at the 11 o'clock lecture. Ladies will be in the lunchroom, which is down the ramp behind this auditorium, across from the gym, so not in the gymnasium this time, but in the lunchroom. And with the 11 a.m. ladies lecture, Kate Mitchell unfortunately was unable to be here because of illness, but she is going to be able to present via Zoom. So it's going to be a Zoom presentation in the lunchroom. So I would request that the ladies try to fill up the front section of those seats in the lunchroom to be as close to the screen to be able to interact with Kate in that presentation here at 11 o'clock. I also want to mention we have two other publishers that are with us in the foyer. Spirit Building, who we enjoy retailing their books in the bookstore and working with them. They have a new book out, This World Is Not Our Home. I would encourage you to take a look at that. That's a brand new publication from Spirit Building that you may not have seen yet. And then along the lines of what we're talking about this week, The Last Mile of the Way, looking at the last week of the Lord's life. That fits in with so much of what's being talked about. This is also available at their booth in the foyer. And then also Vicki Copeland is with us from Copeland Publishers. We've been carrying for quite a while in the bookstore her simplified summary of the Old Testament. But you may not know that there's also the workbook, 26-lesson workbook. There's also the teacher's 26-lesson workbook edition, and there's a PowerPoint available with this. So be sure you check that out and take a look. These are good works that we are happy to partner with and provide through the bookstore, and we're so thankful that they've been with us this week. I know many of you have gotten to meet them and get to know them, and we hope that you'll continue to do that. So we'll dismiss now and reconvene at 11 in here for the men's lecture and in the lunchroom for the ladies' lecture. Also, remember the children will have class in the library as well.